only understand water when you've been in another element, air or land, and then you can start understanding the diversity of behavior. They're also convinced that it doesn't do anything to themselves. Of course, we know the difference. We are that way, humans, with money. We're born in it, we live in it, we die in it, and it's completely transparent. And we're convinced it is a passive medium of exchange that we just use as a convenience for making trades among each other. We believe, actually theoretically, the economic theory assumes this explicitly, that money is neutral, value neutral. What I have discovered, and what I believe we can prove, is that it is not true. That hypothesis, which is pretty central, isn't it valid? Money shapes patterns, behavior, on a large scale. It shapes civilizations. It makes people behave unconsciously in particular directions. And that changes everything. In fact, one can go back and forward. There's a coherence between a society's values. Patriarchal societies have tended to create money systems like the one we're currently familiar with. Centralizing systems, monopolies, imposed from top down, and managed under a veil of secrecy. That is one way of organizing a society. Matrifocal societies have done exactly the opposite. They have used dual systems. Matrifocal societies have done exactly the opposite. They don't have a monopoly. They use two currencies, two kinds of money. One is a money to trade with foreigners, long distance people, that you don't know, or you don't want to be in, or don't have to be in close connection with, and a completely other system for local exchanges. And it's the interaction between these two systems that actually has created completely different civilizations, like the Egyptian one, that is Central Middle Age one, like Bali today. Bali is a perfect example of a demonstration of a system, of a dual currency system that has been operational for 1200 years. The oldest reference that I found for the Balinese system is from 845 AD, at the beginning of writing in Bali. It's older than that. And everybody who goes to Bali is aware that it's a different place. The atmosphere is different, the people behave different. There are more smiles per square kilometer than anywhere else I've seen in the world. There is no begging, not Balinese. Balinese don't beg. There's no prostitution by Balinese. The coherence of society is different. They have been able to resist the invasions of the Dutch, the Japanese, the Indonesians, and currently the tourists. Okay, there are 4 million tourists per year in Bali for 3 million Balinese, and they still keep their culture. Now there's a study we've done in Australia that whenever there is about a tourist ratio of about 1/3 to the population, the traditional culture falls apart. It happened in Europe, in Italy, and in Greece in the 19th century. It happened in Hawaii in the 20th century, in Fiji in the second half of the 20th century. When there is a tourist volume that is substantial, simply people start doing quote-unquote cultural things for tourist dollars, and the whole traditional society falls apart. Bali is different. They're still different today. Now, what people have not realized is why. Some people say, well, Balinese are Balinese, they're different. Well, there's 1 billion Hindus outside of Bali, and they are not behaving like that, so not religious. It's not the food, it's not the air, it's not the water, it's not the race. They're Malay mixes, like all the other parts of Southeast Asia. There's something different. It's their money system. They use a dual system. They have their own national currency, in their case the rupiah, and you have a second one, which is a time currency. And the time currency, the units of account are given through a little wooden gong, which we're going to be in Gali, you'll hear it a lot, the kul kul. which actually measures the time units that people will be using and do collective work. And it is this dual dynamic between the two systems that creates a completely different society. I would suggest you go to one of the feasts. The Balinese how to have feasts, know how to feast. The Odalans. They have 2,000 temples in Bali. Every one of those temples has birthday parties. And you know, I have a birthday every year, and you have a birthday for 10 years, and a birthday for 50 years, and a big birthday for 100 years. The big birthday for 100 years lasts a month, okay? And has, well, or Christmas decorations are peanuts compared to what they do. The thousands of hours, the skill that's involved for making any one of the artifacts that you will see there is mind-blowing. And every Balinese is an artist. It's another difference in the feature in their society. And the reason is that they have another outlet to express the artistic dimension. The taxi driver that you'll be getting from the airport to bring you to the hotel will in the evening play a musical instrument, you know, or make a mask. I mean, that's, everybody does something. They have a dual life. 30% of an adult Balinese life is what they call Narayan Banyar, which means time for the community, for the Banyar, work for the common good of the Banyar, for the community. And they decide in a hyper-democratic way what they do in common, and when they do it, they have two currencies. Now, what that means is the following. The richer groups, the richer parts of Bali, would have projects that cost a lot of money, no conventional money, rupiah, and a little time. The poorer units have a little bit of time, a little bit of money, and a huge amount of time. Both of them can do extraordinary things. We play with only one instrument. We only have, if you're poor, tough luck. Poor neighborhoods don't do funny things, do they? They don't make big cultural events. Why? They have nothing to say, they have nothing to express. Go to Bali. Go to the poorer neighborhoods and see what they can do. They create another world. That is what's potentially available to us. Now, understand me. I'm not at all talking that what we should be doing is create the feast that the Balinese are doing. We have other ways of expressing our cultural life. Just like we don't have to rebuild our cathedrals the way the Middle Ages did. And the Middle Ages was funding their construction exactly like the Balinese. They had a dual system. It was not a time system. They were local currencies. There were two currency systems. And that explains the flourishing of the entire cathedral movement in Western Europe. When that money system changed, the entire process of cathedral building stopped. People were not less Catholic or Christian than before, but it did not take that expression anymore. Now, what are the cathedrals for the 21st century? I don't think it should be buildings. I think we have a huge amount of things that we can do. How about getting rid of analphabetism on a global level? How about making I would almost say redecorating, but it's wrong. Restoring the beauty of this planet to a quality level that is extraordinarily available. It would require a lot of work, and of course, if you try to make that work payable in dollars or in conventional money, no chance. You see, I'm making a distinction between the word jobs and work. A job is actually a word that exists in the English language only since the 18th century. It was introduced with the industrial age. A job was a pile of things you do for money. Okay? Work is a very old word. It goes back to the Edelweiss homilids of the 9th century, or the beginning of the English language. And it basically have the work of God, the work of art, the work of passion, the work of love. Work is something you do because you're passionate about it. My claim is that there is an infinity of things to be done for work in this planet. There is a finite amount of jobs available. And of course, some lucky people in today's system have their work that is their job. Picasso, at the age of 10, decided to stop going to school. He only went to draw and paint. His father letting him get away with it, and he became Picasso. Okay? But he was passionate about that, obviously, and he became a job out of it. He became a wealthy person. These are exceptions, and it exists in all domains. It can be in the military, it can be in business, it can be in education. There are people whose work is jobs, and that's a minority. Now, in Bali, to go back to that example, people can always have, you have two places where you can place your work, not one. And that's where the smiles come from.
Does our current monetary system facilitate the realization of human potential or hinder it? And
Both.
explain.
It orients it in a specific direction.
Can you say our current monetary system?
Our current monetary system is in fact a strong incentive for specific developments and specific directions of human potential. It does, in my opinion, it is what created the Industrial Revolution and spread it around the world. And the Industrial Revolution has given an enormous amount of benefits, at least to the areas, to the parts of the world that were quote-unquote industrialized, the developed world. We are living at a level that only royalty could dream of before the Industrial Revolution. The increase in productivity is a factor of 100 from what was before. Now, of course, it also had some negatives, okay? And the negatives we now become aware of: the pollution, the exhaustion of resources, the ugliness of neighborhoods that are hit by the industrialization process. All these things are the costs that we pay for a particular process. Now, I claim that money, our money system, is actually the engine for both. Okay? It makes us blind to some of the implications of what we do in the Industrial Revolution, but it also has provided all the benefits that I was talking about. So, one of the ideas that is a hidden assumption in economic theory and in most people is that money is just value neutral. It doesn't make a difference. And my claim is that's not true. Our current money system is perceived and actually drives a couple of things. It drives competition. People compete for money. They have to compete for money. The money has to be scarce compared to its usefulness, otherwise it would stop having value. That particular form of money, we're talking bank debt money, has to have that characteristic. It therefore means that there will be a good deal of humanity that never will have enough money to live. This is one of the implications. It also means that decisions are made short term. This is not just kind of a funny feature of our civilization or a neural missing in executive CEO's brain. I had a very interesting conversation with one of the CEOs of one of the largest German companies, a name that everybody would know. And he has 4 children, which is unusual. And we talked about his kids. And I asked him, well, what is the time horizon you use for making decisions about your children? Oh, he says 20, 30 years. And when you come into your office in the morning, what is the time horizon? Oh, he said 3, 4 months. And he added, if I were not doing that, I would be fired and replaced by someone who does. Okay? So it's not that this person is incapable of thinking long term. It's not even the point he doesn't want to think long term. The difference between his family decisions and his business decision is one is driven by money and the other one isn't. What he has to justify financially, the decisions that he makes as a CEO. He has to justify on a human level the decision he makes for his children. They're different. So the short-termism is actually a consequence of the kind of money we use, specifically of interest feature, which is built into the system.
Can you please describe the structural element that impacts that distinction in thinking that you just articulated?
Well, the structural element that's different between a family decision and a business decision The first one is that it is financial on the business side, and it's not financial for the family. But at a deeper level, what is the feature in the financial system that drives that? It is actually interest. Interest is built into our money. Of every money over euros, dollars, yens that are created, or someone's bank debt, you know, whether it's a government, a company, or an individual, that's how the money is created in the process. By definition, interest is built in. Now, when you make a financial decision, there is a technical technique called discounted cash flow in jargon, which basically means that we discount the future cash flows to the value of today. Let me give you an example. If I had an interest rate of 5% per year, and I have an investment that produces $100 in 10 years, like planting a pine, while I have an oak that takes 100 years to be worth $1,000. I'm assuming no inflation here, just to make the conversation easy. Technically, in the real world, I should be indifferent, right? Because every 10 years I can harvest my pine and get my $100, and after 100 years I have $1,000. In comes the financial criteria, the money system, with a positive interest rate, say, of 5%. Well, discounted to today, the pine is worth $67. Discounted to today, the oak worth $1,000 in 100 years is worth $6.70. So it is completely logical to cut down all the oaks and plant a lot of pines, which is what we're doing literally in the harvesting of the forest, but also in all other domains of society. So here you have an example, a demonstration that our money system is not value neutral in terms of time perception. Okay? The time perception is different. By the way, societies that used another money system that didn't have the interest built in, I'm thinking back, say, to the Egyptian or the Central Middle Ages in Europe for 200 or 300 years, they were behaving very differently. Nobody was talking about sustainability, but they were building things to last forever. Nobody was standing on a soapbox to talk about the ethics of thinking about your grandchildren, but they were doing it spontaneously without anybody having to educate them. And what was driven was the fact that they had another money system that actually penalized. Instead of having interest, they had demarrage, which means basically a parking fee on money. And when you have parking fee on money, behavior is very different. Nobody accumulates money for the sake of it. You accumulate wealth in the form of productive assets. Well, that's how we were created, our cathedrals. Okay, that's how they were creating the entire urbanization of Western Europe during the process of the Middle Ages is driven by this logic. We remain investing at very, very long term. The proof is cathedrals are still there, you can still visit it. What will remain of our civilization in 1,000 years? What will be visible? What have we created that is conceived to last for 1,000 years?
Happy Meals. What are the problems that can't be solved under the competitive system?
It's not just the competitive system, the competitiveness of the system. My claim is that our current monetary system will not be able to deal with 4 major megatrends that are very visible to everybody, and simply will not be able to resolve the money questions that these megatrends pose. Let me give you an example. The first one is the aging of our society. When Bismarck decided that 65 was a good age to retire, there were about 4% of the population that ever reached that age. So the promises were made that when you reach that age, you're going to have a nice retirement. Okay? Good. Well, now we're going to 1 out of 7 people in the developed world is now at that age already. And we're going to 1 out of 4 in the next 20 or 30 years. Well, the promises of pensions and healthcare to the elderly are just not going to be possible with the money system that we currently have. You would have to raise taxes beyond horizon. Just to give you one idea there, the conventional way of dealing with the aging problem and the financial implications of the aging problem, to be more precise, is while we have a pie of a certain size, we have more and more elderly that need to eat from it, so let's cut the slices smaller. Okay, that's one way. The second solution, which is the Anglo-Saxon, which is the German or the Scandinavian one, a promise is a promise. Let's go bankrupt. There's a third way. The Japanese have invented the money system. They call it furiakipu, which means carrying relationship ticket. The unit of account is the hour of service to an elderly person. And I can earn credits and send the credits to my mother in another place of the country. It's a currency. There are 370 systems currently operational in Japan, which are addressing that problem. So there is the third solution. That's an example of what I mean, the two classical solutions of shrinking the sizes of the promises or going bankrupt. The third solution, an innovation, a currency innovation. But there are others. I think that jobs as a concept were an industrial age construct, and they will die with the industrial age. A job for everybody is just not possible. We have over 1 billion people today on the planet that are eager and happy to do work for pay, but there is no pay. So they're unemployed or underemployed. Many of them are in developing countries, but this is spreading now across the world, also in developed countries. And in post-industrial age, jobs are not going to be available for the 6 billion that we currently have, or the 8 or 10 billion that we're going to have in the next 20 years. So we need to reinvent another way of providing the means for living to billions of people. Okay? And if I may go back for a split second to the Bali example, we can create feasts and stuff that absorbs a third of our time tomorrow morning, okay? But don't believe you're going to pay it with normal money. That's the key. So, second problem. The jobless growth that become possible with our technologies will not make possible the resolution of unemployment on a global level for the foreseeable future. Third problem, the environmental degradation and species extinction. I believe that this is due to the conflict that we currently have between, on the one side, short-term thinking that drives the corporations and the long-term necessities of society. I believe that an oil company knows more about the needs and the ways of having energy for the next 100 years than any government or anybody in society. But their objective is the next quarter results, or perhaps the next year or two results. And I don't believe that's going to take care of my grandchildren. So that's the problem. There is a conflict between stockholders' optimization, which is optimized with a conventional money and short-term thinking, and the needs for society for long-term thinking. I think we can realign those with a currency innovation, where it becomes profitable to think long-term. One of the projects I'm working on is called Lietaer, that has that very purpose. Okay. Now, the fourth megatrend is actually monetary instability. The current system is systemically unstable. We have had 87 countries that have gone to major currency crisis. We're not at the end of it. In fact, it's one of the next ones that some monetary experts are talking about today is the possibility for a dollar crisis. This is not me talking, it's Paul Volcker, ex-chairman of the Federal Reserve, who's saying there's a 75% chance for a dollar hard landing in the next 4 or 5 years. Many other people are saying the same thing. So our current system is just not sustainable itself. It is systemically unstable, and it creates an enormous amount of suffering when a monetary crisis or a banking crisis hits a country. This is worse than a tsunami. Okay? So that is one of the dimensions that we're not addressing by believing that our current system is the only way of dealing with our future. So these 4 megatrends, I repeat, aging of society and the promises made to the aging population, jobless growth that's become possible with technologies, degradation of the environment and the problems of species extinction that are actually due to a conflict between short-term thinking and what we need in society, which is long-term strategies. And finally, monetary instability. None of these four can be solved within the current system. So we're obliged to look at outside of the box. I think it's time to look at outside of the box.
What are some of the alternatives?
We haven't checked them. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Can you tell me about what's so difficult to distinguish that drives the structure and the thinking of our present competitive paradigm? What's so
Well,
elusive about it?
If I may use the metaphor of the fish in the water again, it is so pervasive, you've never seen anything else, you've never lived anything else. So it has become part of the way of life and part of seeing reality. And the more you've been trained in economics, the more you take the money system as a granted. The monetary system is considered, like the number of planets in the solar system, a given. And from that context, well, it's unthinkable to think outside of that particular box. So it's habit is one, and of course the structure, any systemic change upsets some interests, so therefore there are also motivations not to change the system. Power is based on money. Friedrich Nietzsche has a very perfect description of this. He said, money is the crowbar of power. Does that make you sneeze?
No, but I can see a visual in the film.
Well, money as a crowbar of power basically means that when something needs to be done that's unpleasant, you can starve it for money and it will disappear. This is what we're doing on a global level. Depriving countries of the possibility of financing their own development if they don't behave politically in a particular way. That's power. It also happens within a country. Okay? How many projects do you know that are worthwhile and that will never happen because of lack of money?
Do you make a distinction between money and capital?
Yes.
Can you describe
I'm making a distinction between money, capital, and wealth. Okay? Money is the medium of exchange. Technically, it would be legal tender. In each country, you have a particular money that has been declared legal tender, what you have to pay taxes. There's another concept that's different, which is currency. Currency is what people use de facto as a medium of exchange. And it doesn't have to be legal tender. It can be common tender. For example, we have frequent flyer miles. This is a currency issued by airline associations, alliances, for motivating loyalty to particular airline groups. It is a currency. Okay, but it's not issued by banks, and doesn't have interest, and it has a bunch of other characteristics. Another example is time dollars, which is there are about 300 or 400 systems now operational around the world, time banks and time dollars, and they are particularly operational in poorer neighborhoods. They are solving social problems that otherwise would not be solvable in the same way. The Furiakipo system in Japan that takes care of the elderly. It's a currency. So there are other tools that are media of exchange that are not legal tender and that can be designed to address specific issues. Actually, every one of the four problems that we talked about earlier, whether it is aging, whether it is joblessness, whether it is the environment, or whether it is monetary instability, all of them can be addressed with specific new designs for complementary currencies. I call them complementary because they are not really replacing the conventional national money, but they play a role in that the national currency, national money, is not actually doing, okay, or not doing as well. Okay, I don't believe that we should starve any child around the world from education. And the last reason for doing that should be the lack of money. One definition of currency is basically whatever a community accepts as a medium of exchange. Let me describe you a fictitious example that a Martian lands on the wrong side of the railroad tracks in one of our bigger cities, or in parts of the world that are underdeveloped today. And he finds out that the kids are not taken care of, that the roads have potholes, that the lights are not functioning, that the trees are dying, the elderly are not taken care of. All these things are a big mess. And he finds out that there are lots of people around and organizations actually very specialized and very competent to solve every one of those problems. And he asks, well, what are you waiting for? And the answer is, we were like waiting for money. Oh, and what is that strange thing you call money? Well, it's an agreement in a community to use something as a medium of exchange. Don't you think you may leave this planet thinking there's no intelligent life here?
Very good.
So I think there are other ways of addressing our problems than being stuck with the conventional system and a monopoly. I have no problems with the existing money system as it is. As a competitive driven system, it has done a lot of good to create our industrial revolutions and all the benefits that arise of it. But when you impose a monopoly of it, then you're starving off all the cooperative functions in society. All the functions like taking care of the elderly, of the kids, of the environment, all these things that are soft, that are not really well served by competition. That is what's being starved. That's why we end up having school teachers paid a pittance, while investment bankers are paying fortunes. Which one is doing the harder work? Which one is doing the work that's most important for the future of society? We do have the question, don't we? But it's not paid the same way. And we believe it's kind of an accident. It's not a scarcity factor. It has to do with what money is well designed to do. It's not designed to take care of kids in a cooperative way, which is basically what learning and education is about.
What's the connection?
Just go ahead and straighten out your tie thing, Brian. It's not over.
What is the connection between competitive paradigm, interest attached to the creation of money, and most people not fulfilling their destiny or their purpose and spending their lives just getting by?
Well, it's a very broad list you read there. The competitive paradigm, which is actually serviced by a kind of money which has a monopoly, and that money has to be scarce in order to keep its value. That's why central banks are in the job of keeping the scarcity of the money and actually competing internationally for the scarcity between themselves. Okay? And at the same time, we have all these things that need to be done. Where will the money go when it is artificially scarce? It will go to the most quote-unquote productive functions, productive short-term functions. It will do that very well. Now, are those the ones that society needs? Well, taking care of a kid for 10, 15 years before it becomes a decent citizen is not a very productive function. So we don't put much money in it.
What is a productive function?
Production function is something that produces more money to the people who spend the money on it. That is how it's defined. That's what a competitive paradigm will do. That's what money is designed to promote and function with. So it's, I believe it differently. I believe that a child's brain is a jewel of potential. I believe that every child is a genius. Every child, and that we just don't have the patience or the resources to find out what that child is a genius in. I think that the reason that geniuses are scarce is because we never develop them. We don't give them the opportunity. There may be geniuses in fields that we don't even have a clue about, but who will mobilize the resources, who will give the time necessary to do that. That is what's scarce.
So carry out that example of the child who's not nurtured. In fact, what they are indoctrinated into, and how people essentially enter into the marketplace. And then maybe when I'm 60, I'll do what I really love. Can you describe that process?
I think the process of what you're describing in a normal way, which is basically training for jobs. Most of our education has been conceived as training for jobs. Education became generalized under Napoleon Bonaparte. He's the one who actually decided to change an agrarian society, France at the time, in the early 19th century, into quote-unquote an industrial power. And he therefore made compulsory education universal. And the idea was to teach kids 4 principles, which is the real agenda of the public education system. Number 1, do what I say. Not do what I do what I say. Number 2, be on time. Number 3, be proud of your nation state. Okay? And number 4 is accept those things as self-evident. And that particular agenda is trained in geography, in mathematics, in Latin, in literature, whatever you think. You always do what you say, do it on time. That list is embedded in our education system. We don't spend any time to find out what the kid is a genius in, do we? Because it may not fit any of those categories. Now, the purpose was different. Okay? It was to achieve a particular industrial society, which was also a military society. They needed to have soldiers that are on time, do what they say, do it on time, and be proud of the nation state. So we're still churning kids out today for that industrial age. And we're in the post-industrial age today. What's fascinating to me is that even the military today went people who don't necessarily obey to all these rules. They want to have creativity. They want to have personal initiative. Okay? Even the military. Businesses are completely convinced that they want that. Everybody was looking for other qualities than what the education system was designed to produce. Okay? So I think we are not even beginning to consider what's important for the future. Because it would be the opposite. What you need to do today is someone who's creative, rather than do what I say. The time is actually not that critical, as long as it's done. Okay? And the proud of the nation state, actually, should you not consider to be a citizen of the world? That's what everybody wants today. So we're still off into, we're 200 years late. We're churning out kids for a world that has stopped existing, that has already died.
Do you see, how is money linked to the sovereignty of the individual?
Well, money is currently linked to the sovereignty of a nation state. Historically, back to Aristotle actually, 4th century BC, he considered that issuing of money was the characteristic of the sovereign. To him, that meant the king, or the city. Okay, that was the sovereign unity. We had kings doing that, and when we had emperors, the good imperial money systems became relevant. When the nation state became the carrier of power, every national currency, the first thing they do is have a flag a national anthem, and their money. Okay, that's part of the attributes of quote-unquote sovereignty. So the individual is not sovereign from a monetary perspective today. It is in fact infatuated to, and always has been, to whoever was the sovereign, which was in different time periods, different things. Actually, before Aristotle, it was the temples that were issuing money, when they had the power. So the power of issuing money has always been related to who has the real power within a society. So when I find it interesting that people talk today a lot about the need for regional development, for regional autonomy, for bioregional integration. And the solution they find for that is throwing national money at it. Well, this is actually pretty similar to prescribing alcohol to an alcoholic. Okay? Let me give you a historical example where it actually was done the opposite way, what the purpose was. In Ghana, today's Ghana was the Gold Coast in the 19th century. When it became a colony of Britain, they had a big problem, particularly when it went to the hinterland, where the bulk of the population was. These people were living in 300-400 communities, tribes, that were perfectly autonomous. They didn't need absolutely anything, nothing from the British. So why do you have an empire and why do you have a colony if they don't need anything from you? Okay? So they invented a solution. And let me first tell you what the solution was not. They did not start a marketing campaign for English goods. This other thing they didn't do was send in the army and break up the traditional trading patterns. No. The solution was much more elegant and simple than that. Any clerk knew it at the time. They created a national currency, a Ghana currency. And they asked every hut, which is the extended family unit that the society was organized under, to contribute a tax of £3, nothing. You know, it's equivalent to $5-6, per year. But only in that money. In 5 or 10 years' time, every one of those sustainable societies fell apart. Because everybody needed to trade outside of the traditional system in order to get these £3. That was enough to break the system up. So we have become so obnubilated with our conventional money on a national level that when politicians or regional development people are talking about the need to regional develop, they don't even see the connection with the problem that they don't have a national currency, that they only use national currency to do this. Back to the alcohol and the alcoholic. We're doing exactly the opposite. And it's subliminal, but it's very effective.
Historically, do you see this as an opportunity now?
Definitely. Definitely I see a huge opportunity today. The opportunity lies in many directions. First of all, I believe that we know now enough to solve every one of the problems that we have on the planet. It's not a lack of knowledge. It used to be that way. We didn't have the technologies, we didn't have the knowledge, we didn't have the communication means to spread that information. We have all that today. It's a huge opportunity. The other opportunity is that there's a shift in values. We are at the end of an age where the patriarchal values are unquestioned. Some people may not like it, but it's a fact. We are at the end of an age where hyper-rationality, i.e. the idea that reason is the only legitimate way of apprehending reality, is now in question. In business, they talk about intuition as an important tool. Follow your guts. This is new. It used to be completely rational. And if you couldn't say it rationally, you had nothing to say. It was irrational and therefore irrelevant. So that is a possibility, that worldview started in 700 BC. We're at the end of this. We're at the end of the modernist age, the age in which the superhuman, the individual, the glorified individual that as a hero would kind of manifest its power, his or her power in society. That view is now being questioned. The modernist age is what brought us also the pollution and all the breakdowns of the society that we currently have. We're at the end of the industrial age. Everybody talks about the new information age. They kind of forget to mention that all the good stuff of the new information and knowledge age also means the end of the industrial age. And such transitions are typically pretty tough periods, but they're also huge opportunities. And finally, we're at the end of the Cold War, where two particular industrial models were competing for the ideological superiority and military manifestation of that. So this is extraordinary. We've never been at a convergence in such a short time period where all these values are being questioned at the same time, and when we have the new means to manifest our creativity in an extraordinary way. I feel very blessed to be alive in this time period. It's probably going to be messy for a while, particularly if we're going to have monetary instability on a large scale. But what's behind or below could be a planetary wisdom civilization like we've never seen before, that can integrate the wisdom of all previous civilizations, that can integrate the worldviews of different people in a rich fabric that provides a diversity of perspectives. Fascinating. A planet of sustainable abundance. That's the one I can see coming beyond the mess.
What's the importance of the individual being both the issuer of money and the author of credit in this new paradigm?
The importance of the individual in issuing money is in fact a bit of a misnomer from my perspective. I think it is a community that accepts the currency. If I issue Bernard money, it's meaningless. It's only other people accepting it that actually makes it a currency. So it is a community that has to accept a particular currency. Now we can design many different ways of creating our money, okay? And some of the more stable ones, for example, mutual credit, in which a community decides to, as a whole, to have as a rule that if I do something for you, well, I get a credit and you have a debit. And this is a way of creating a currency if other people accept my credits for services that or goods that they would be producing. And you work with someone else. You work at someone else's garden or whatever else you want to do that would actually offset your debit. So this is another mechanism of creating a medium of exchange. It's the individual who does it, but it is within a community that accepts it. So that's the way I would make the distinction here. It's not a contradiction or a conflict between the individual and the collective. It is a specific community in which the individual belongs and is active and is accepted as a member that actually the complementary currency is created when it is a mutual credit system.
Some people advocate a single global currency managed by a central institution. How do you feel about that?
I think we need a global currency. I don't think we need a single global currency. I think, what I mean, be more clear, I don't claim that this is the end of the national currencies. The national money will be there way after we're all dead. However, they will not have a monopoly. I see the need for a global currency that, for example, stabilizes the global economy and makes international trade, but it is not that currency that I would go for a haircut at my local barber. It doesn't have to be the same. We have different currencies for different purposes. And yes, we need a new global currency, because the dollar is not anymore a standard of value today. It's a yo-yo that changes in value by a factor of 2 to 1 in a year or two. So it is not really a reference that is usable as a value reference, which is one of the first functions that any money or currency should have. On an international level, we currently live without a standard of value, which has a huge inefficiency. I can only compare it. Let's assume that we assume that the yard or the meter will be variable in length with the temperature differential between the two places where I export and import. Well, it's possible to do business that way, and we're going to have huge investments in insurance against a shrinking yard or a shrinking meter. And we have forecasting companies and doing all these work and contracts for insurance and all that stuff. It's going to cost a lot of money instead of having a standard. That's what we do with money internationally. You can make a contract today, worldwide, specifying all the specifications of quality and size and all the other good stuff, except the price. Because if I specify the price, I'm going to have to choose someone's currency that may be completely different by the time I get the goods. Completely inefficient.
A lot of people are still advocating gold as a backing of money, and how do you feel about any sort of commodity backing money, and what do you, in your proposal, what do you propose as the backing for currency?
The obsession with gold is a very, very old one. Definitely it has been considered as, well, in the Quran they talk about it as gold and silver has been created by Allah, by God, for the purposes of money. So therefore gold and silver is to be money. It's interesting that from my definition, from the way I look at it, something becomes money when a particular community decides to use it as a medium of exchange. And gold was chosen because it was scarce. It can be hoarded, and it's in small volume, a large value. It's not accidental that patriarchal societies are the ones who chose gold as a medium of exchange and use it as a monopoly. Okay? So we're back to the issue of values, the coherence of a value in a society. It doesn't matter whether it's gold or something else, as long as it was scarce and controlled. Today, dollars are scarce. They're kept scarce artificially, but they could just do as good a job. So what you make your money relevant for is, to me, less important than the dynamics of the creation of the money. My personal view is that for example, a global currency, we would need a currency that's fully backed, not by gold alone, but I see a basket of the dozen major commodities that are traded internationally, gold, so it would be a small part for the nostalgic, but oil is the big one, copper, wheat, carbon credits, could have services in there. A basket of the most important internationally traded goods and services, and use that as a unit. Okay, a big advantage for this is that it's inflation proof, because inflation is by definition the value of a basket. So here we have actually a basket that has the most important ingredients. It's also a currency that could reprogram the long-term thinking, make it profitable. I explain that. If you have a basket of commodities as a backing, and it is literally a backing in the sense that there are inventory receipts, the money issued, the currency issued is an inventory receipt for stuff that's really in the basket. Well, if you do that, there's a storage cost involved. And the storage cost is actually a parking fee for your money. So the parking fee would do what the Egyptians did. You know, the Demirage system that they had for the corn money was the mechanism by which the money was kept circulating. Now, when you have a discounted cash flow analysis with a negative interest rate, suddenly the future becomes more important than the present. In such a society, people invest in oaks. They build buildings that last forever. We've had this historically, we could do it again. But we have to, of course, first of all, conscious of that's what we're doing. So we can actually create a currency that's global, that nobody's national currency. I believe a global currency should not be anybody's national currency. Okay? There's always going to be conflict between the national priorities and the role of on the global level. Okay? So nobody's national currency should be the global currency. Second point, if you can have a currency that's inflation proof, that's extraordinarily useful for comparing performances or results of corporations around the world. Currently we can't do that because in addition we can't do it over time because of the inflation aspect. So here we have a currency unit that will actually be perfectly suitable for global trade, global planning, global contracts among corporations. Okay? And by reprogramming it with a Demirage charge, which is the parking fee for money, for the Terra, the unit of account that I propose is, the name is Terra, planet Earth, in Latin. You can actually make it profitable to think long term. Instead of having the conflict between the long-term interests of society and the financial interests of the stockholders, you can align the two so that long-term thinking becomes profitable. I think that's the way that we will resolve our conflicts with the whole sustainability issue between the corporate world and sustainability. That's the only way. Without it, I don't think, if we don't rethink our money, we don't have a chance to address any of the problems that we talked about earlier.
Run out of tape.
Okay.
Okay. So here's what I propose. You go upstairs.